Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to day two of the TIPE conference. We had some amazing sessions yesterday and last night from our APAC and EMEA regions. I hope you had a chance to attend those sessions live. If not, rest reassured, we recorded all sessions and we will be sharing them on YouTube shortly. So they will be available on our YouTube channel, and we are going to communicate as soon as they are available. Now, we do have a great program for day two as well, starting with this upcoming keynote fireside chat. So my name is Nora, should have started there. For those of you who do not know me, I am the founder of Women in 3D Printing, the organization behind this conference. And today I have the pleasure to have a chat with a very, very special guest, Reshma Saujani. So Reshma is and Reshma, feel free to hop on the stage now if you want to. I'm going to introduce you and then we're going to get started. So Reshma is the CEO of the Marshall Plan for Moms and the founder of Girls Who Code. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with either one of those organizations. She is also the author of the international bestseller, Brave, Not Perfect. And her influential TED Talk, Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection, has more than 5 million views globally. I actually think it might be closer to 6 million now. And I know that wasn't just me watching, for 24 hours straight, the last million. I remember, I had started a Women in 3D Printing community a couple of years before Reshma's TED Talk, and her words really resonated with me. So, as I said, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome her on stage today. She's also the author of the forthcoming book, Pay Up, The Future of Women and Work, and Why It's Different Than You Think. You will all have a chance to get a copy of the book during the career fair tomorrow. So we are going to circulate a sign-up form, and the first 50 signees, the 25 North America, 25 EMEA, will receive a copy of the book once it's out. So really, you wanna stay tuned on that one. Reshma, as I said, it is an honor to have you with us today. As I said, I watch your TED Talk quite a lot of and truly really influenced me. And as I said, a real honor to have you here today. So I would like to start right away. Let's jump right into it because we don't have too much time, and I want to make sure we have at least 10 minutes with Q&A with the audience. However, for the next 20 minutes, all my questions, if you don't mind. So I want to start by asking you a personal question. So you're a mom, and I assume you're a very busy entrepreneur. So again, thank you for your time today. So in about 90 minutes, we're going to hear from four moms, including Nora, the Chief Strategy Officer at the Marshall Plans for Mom, and they're going to talk about creating a work-life balance as a working mom. And so as we cue in this panel, I would like to ask you how you are creating a work-life balance for yourself. And as a secondary question, if and how COVID has impacted that. And I believe it may have. So I would love to hear your take on that one.
Look, I think that there's no such thing as balance. And what I talk about in my book, it's this idea of having it all is really a euphemism of doing it all. And so much of the old language that we've had, because of I think corporate feminism, we have to throw it in the garbage. And I think COVID has really demonstrated that. So for me, I write about in my forthcoming book, Pay Up, that I built Girls Who Code by telling girls to storm the corner office. And we were told that if we leaned in hard enough, if we tried hard enough, we got a mentor, we got a sponsor, that we would get to equality. But that was a lie because, 86% of domestic work at home is done by women. And until we get to equality in the home, we're never going to get to equality in the workplace. And so when I had my first child, who I had a lot of fertility challenges, and when I had my first son, Shaan, I barely saw him. I didn't see his first steps. I didn't do bath time. I didn't feed him any meals during the week. I was on a plane, train, building Girls Who Code, and I thought that that's what I had to do. And that was the sacrifice that you make as a working mom. I had my second son 3 weeks before lockdown. And with my second son, Sai, I did see him walk. I did see him say his first words. I do give him a bath every night. I do get to feed him and participate in, his meals and his learning and his living. And I've done it at the same time of building the second movement in my life, Marshall Plan for Moms. So I've done it differently, because I've told myself another reality. And I think that that's the conversation that we have to have now, and that COVID has basically exposed to us, is that, for example, workplaces have never been built around women and around mothers and around parents. And it's why we don't have the structural things that we need in order to show up in our full self as mothers and our full self as workers, like affordable childcare, paid leave, rooting out the motherhood penalty. And so we need to have a very different conversation. And I think in many ways, the great resignation, the aftermath of the pandemic has opened up the opportunity for us to kind of build it back better, genuinely.
Those are really, really good points. And I want to ask you a follow-up question to this, because I know in our audience, we do have a lot of we have a lot of hiring managers. We have a lot of people who are currently, myself here, like we're hiring currently in my company. So not at Women 3 Printing, but at Fast Reduce. And so we are like, what are the tips you would give to employers on how to be more of the reality of being a working mom or working?
Yeah. Listen, I think we're in the throes of, the great resignation. Like, more people are leaving the workforce than in the history of our nation. 12 million women have left the workforce. And while, several million have come back, we're still missing several million. And the women that we are missing are parents, right? And so I think now, and also people are staying in their jobs for less than a year now. And it's expensive to have that kind of attrition rate. So I think that many people right now are looking for the best companies to work for that are not going to make them have to choose between their work and their life. And I think that's moms and dads. I talked to a lot of dads today who said, one of the great things about the pandemic is that when schools were open, I got to take my son or my daughter to school. And I'm never going to give that up. I'm never going to give up being able to take them to soccer class or being able to participate in doing homework. And so I think that people are looking for a very different reality, from their workplaces. And so, Marshall Plan for Moms, we wrote a playbook of what workplaces can do to actually support mothers and thus support parents. I think that the first thing that many people are looking for is flexibility, right? And predictability if you are an hourly worker. You have a lot of responsibilities. And right now, in the middle of Omicron, in the middle of school closures, the fact that half of the daycare centers are shut down, we need to be able to have some flexibility and control over our schedules, because things are not all right. And the fact that you see so many employers being like, well, come back to work, we're opening up the offices, or not having the same amount of patience when your kid interrupts your Zoom call, shows that we have a lot of work to do in removing the sentiment that, like, being a parent is a distraction to your work, that you cannot be an ideal worker if you have parental responsibilities. That has to shift. I think the second thing that we've learned in this pandemic is that childcare has never been affordable, and that in order for mothers to participate fully in the workforce, childcare needs to be affordable. And as companies are thinking about the types of benefits that they want to offer, they should be subsidizing childcare. Right now, less than 20% of companies subsidize childcare. That number has got to go up to 100%. If you're thinking, and as employees are shopping around for the best place to work, that's one of the things that they're thinking about, right? And so I think that we have to basically, deepen the conversation and the push and the movement to get companies to subsidize childcare. And the third thing is, I really believe, is really having a conversation, around the motherhood penalty. When we still have a 30 cents per dollar pay gap between men and women. But the reality is that the pay gap is not between childless women and childless men. It's between mothers and fathers. When we see a dad, we say, let's pay him more. He's got a lot of responsibilities. When we see a mother, we say, she's going to be distracted. I don't know. And the reality is because we still live in a country that doesn't offer paid leave. Many of us have to take time off from our jobs when we have a child. And the reality is most women lose 40% of their income if they take a year off, from their job. And we are, as many of us are so desperate to get back. When we do that first negotiation, we're like, pay me whatever, 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 whatever. And that's how the gap starts increasing. And so we have to
Yeah.
fix that once and for all.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like it is, like, and it adds up. The child, like, there is no paid childcare, and you're also taking a gap, so everything adds up to
Yeah.
that huge gap that you're talking about. So fully agreed here, and I do see the chat,
I see what
your
you're, I'm like,
community.
look at that. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Definitely
We
living
the
this as well.
childcare is so critical and so important and so hot right now. I mean, I get so frustrated when I watch, all these like shows. Where are the people? Why aren't they coming back to work? Well, it's so obvious. It's parents who can't
Yeah.
come back to work in the same capacity because daycare centers are shut down. Childcare centers are closed. It is virtually impossible right now to find care at a cost that's affordable. Most people spend in the United States spend more on childcare than they spend on their mortgage. And, like people are saying in the chat, that is a very United States problem. In many other nations, right, you get subsidies, you get parental income, you get tax breaks, right? We value family, we value these things, and not just the government, but employers too.
Yeah, and I'm actually French. I'm living in the US, but I've had both experiences, and my parents won't believe me when I'm telling them how much I'm paying for daycare for my oldest. So yeah, it's the gap is very
Never
steep,
was
and the cultural difference between Europe and even the rest of the world and the US is
And we
not
in the
normal
United
for
States
sure.
have the lowest birth rate in the history of our nation, right?
Yeah,
Most young people, they don't want to have kids because it's too
yeah,
expensive. And that's why I
right.
say to people as we're having this conversation, it's not just a movement for parents, it's a movement for people who may want to have kids one day. Don't let society take away your choice,
Mm.
right? Fight for the structures and policies that need to be put into place to give you the choice that if and when you may choose that you would say, yeah, I can afford it. I can afford to have a child. And so that to me is just critical.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to send just a reminder to everyone to use the Q&A panel if you want to ask questions to Reshma once I am done with mine. So as a follow-up question here, Reshma, I want to ask you something related to your TED Talk. So your 2016 TED Talk about bravery and resilience. Talk you and sisterhood, which I know being a core value of Girls Who Could. So the women in 3D printing community has very strong men allies, and you may see a few of them here in the chat being extremely active in our community. So it's usually between 20 to 40%, even sometimes based on the locations of our chapters, men participating in our global events. So I am curious to hear your take on how men can actually partake in the sisterhood you are mentioning in your talk.
I mean, both of these movements that I've built, men have been critical to it. 40% of Girls Who Code teachers are men. Half of my board are men. My first couple biggest funders, including Jack Dorsey, were men. When I started the Marshall Plan for Moms and I started building this C3, my first 3 top funders were men. I did a report, I took an ad in the Washington Post with 50 men led by Steph Curry and Don Cheadle and Colin Farrell saying, yes, mothers are not America's social safety net. And so men are critical to the movement and equality. And I think especially, right now, as we are seeing a massive rollback, in opportunities for women than we've ever seen in the history of our nation. We need men to step back and say, no, 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 we are not going back, for our daughter's sake, for our partner's sake, for the sake of the world that we actually want to live in. One of my favorite stories a couple of years ago at Girls Who Code is I had gone to the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York, and RIT had made an enormous progress in increasing the amount of women that were majoring in computer science. When I started Girls Who Code, less than 18% of CS majors were women. 10 years later now, we've moved that number up to 40% in many universities, 50 at MIT and Stanford and some of the top schools. And so, RIT had made enormous progress. So I went to go speak to their women in computing group. And as I was sitting there speaking to them, I saw a few young men sitting in the back. And after my talk, I went up to them and I said, so who are you? And they said, well, we're the men who support the women in computing group. They had formed a club inside a club. And what they said to me is like, we know our privilege. We know that we have it easier than our female colleagues. And so when there's a microaggression made in a classroom, we stand up. When we go to an interview at, Twitter, Google, wherever, right, Ford, we're the ones who come back with, here's what you need to know, right? We are standing up in the sisterhood, in ways so you don't have to always be the one, because the world that we're creating is going to be better for all of us, not just women. And I have seen this incredibly powerful trend over the past couple of years as I've been going, to college campuses, where I feel like this next generation of young men are just critical. I mean, even again, 40% of girls who co-teachers are men, and they're not all dads, right? It's like, so it's really, 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 I think, powerful what we're able to do. Yeah. We're able to really create. But I still think, I as I give these bravery talks too about what bravery means for men, I still do think a lot of men are like, need to know what they need to do to be an ally. So for example, I gave 150 talks about Brave Not Perfect, when my book came out. And when I went to Q&A time, invariably, even though when I'm talking about perfectionism about women, during Q&A, the first 10 hands raised were always men, right? And I knew what the women were doing. We were basically thinking about the question, perfecting it, right? Only to never get the chance to ask. And, what was happening in this dynamic is that the men, because we didn't raise our hands, thought we had nothing to say. And we were pissed that Joe said the same thing that I was going to say, and now he's the smart one and I don't have anything to say. And so what I explained to men is this dynamic and the fact that 80% men speak 80% more in meetings. And so if you want to inspire bravery, amongst women, just be quiet. Just count to 100. Give us a beat, right? To put our hand up in the air so you understand the dynamic. And a lot of men have told me that's really helpful. That's really helpful, is understanding that gendered dynamic that has happened, again, by no fault of our own, because we have been socialized to be perfect and to ask the perfect question.
Yeah, and I love this because you're not putting it back on women to be the one necessarily rushing to raise the hand. I mean, even though we need to rush a little bit more, maybe sometimes, and not wait to indeed having the perfect question. If it's half and half and they meet us in between, that's indeed the way to go, in my opinion. So very powerful here. Thank you so much, Reshma. I know we're getting close to what I said. I would open up to Q&A. However, I have one last question I want to ask you that I absolutely want to ask because it's really important to me. 3D printing board. So you have spent really more than a decade really building the movement and girls, economic empowerment, working to close the gender gap in tech. However, I'm also noticing that your mission goes beyond gender parity. One look at either Girls Who Code or the Marshall Plan for Moms website, and we will see that your organizations are making a real effort in showing diversity in all its forms. So I want to ask you how that translates in your programs and broader mission. And the reason, again, I'm asking you is that we know at Women 3D Printing, we do have an effort to do. We have a mission here, and it's going beyond the gender parity. And so really want to take this opportunity to ask you how you've been doing so far.
Look, when I started Girls Who Code, I'm not a coder, but I am the daughter of refugees. And I've had a job since I was 12 years old. And what had inspired me to start Girls Who Code was the fact that you made $100,000 as a software programmer. And as a daughter who grew up in a working class family, I was like, wow. And so when I saw that all these classrooms didn't look like us, didn't have women, much less brown and Black women, that is what inspired me to start Girls Who Code. And so when I built Girls Who Code, I said from the beginning that half the girls we taught would be under the poverty line and half the girls would be Black and Latina. And so as we grew to 10,000 Girls Who Code clubs across the country, as we taught 450,000 girls, we built the largest pipeline of not just women, but women of color.
Yeah.
You know, and so for me, racial equity, equality, reducing poverty, that has always been at the center, you know what I mean, of every movement I built. And it's the same thing with Marshall Plan for Moms. You know, when you think about the millions of women who've left the workforce, the vast majority of them are Black and brown and, you know, are low wage workers. The vast majority of them who have been, 70% of Black women are not only the sole breadwinner, you know what I mean, but they're the sole caretaker. So as we think about not having affordable childcare, if we think about not having paid leave, if we think about the mom, right, who, you know, is having to take care of her child, probably living in a childcare desert, you know, in a community that doesn't have disparate Wi-Fi, where schools are closed, what does her future look like? And for me, I really saw the impact of this during COVID at Girls Who Code, where I saw I saw the fact that we needed to have a 2-generational strategy. I saw so many of my girls that we had fought, you know what I mean, to help them march up the middle class. And then COVID happened. And then their moms were essential workers and they didn't have childcare for their siblings. And so they had to drop out of school or not go to college or not major in computer science to take care of the children. And it was always the girls. And it was mostly girls of color, right? And so that's why I've committed to not only helping girls, but helping their moms too. Because if we want to get to equality, if we want to get to equity, right, we have got to fight for both of them.
It's crazy to think that this is still a reality today in America in 2022.
Right, because we as Americans love to go to other nations and, you know, help their girls learn, right, and send them to school. But guess what? Like, our kids aren't going to school, right? Our kids aren't learning. Our kids aren't getting opportunity. And so it's very, and we're still not talking about the ramifications of this yet, nor facing them. It's the same thing for me when I just think about, you know, we have the lowest labor market participation of women since 1989, right? Workplaces just started allowing women in 1960. This fight has not been happening for that long. So to roll back 13 years of progress in 9 months should scare the bejesus out of everybody. It should be the number one priority, you know what I mean, of every single company and all of us as activists, right? Because we fought too hard to get here, right?
Yeah.
In order to roll back.
And you're so right. I mean, back to, you know, industry and manufacturing more globally, we do have a shortage right now, we all know, in the workforce for manufacturing. And we know we have to rely on women to be working in this industry.
Yeah.
And much to it. It's not just how many women are graduating. It's like the entire infrastructure around it and making sure that women are able to go to work, period.
And that's what I'm so glad, you know, as you all read the book and, you know, and please give it to a friend. It's like, to me, it was like the history of it, understanding how it pieces together and then understanding that what we can do. There was so much around it that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know the history, right, of how we got here and how we've been told this big lie that was like, we were never going to get to equality, you know, until we had some fundamental structural changes. But I think the excitement is that if there's ever been a time to push companies to subsidize childcare, it's now, right? If there's ever been a time to fix the pay gap, it's now. If there's ever been a time where our partners are like, okay, like, how do we change the balance of work that we do? I'm talking about the unpaid labor in our homes. It's now. If there's ever been a time to make sure that our sons value caretaking just as much as our daughters, it's now.
So I as much as I want to ask you one last question, I'm going to go into the Q&A panel. I'm going to behave and also know we only have a few minutes left. So I may be able to ask you only one question, unfortunately. I'm seeing a couple who have, give me 1 second, I'm just going to read through the two who have a tie here. Yeah, let's go with this one. So should we rely on government policies to change the workplace for working moms, or is it a push on the private sector?
Okay, so you're going to get cynical, Reshma, today. You can't rely on the government. I mean, the fact that, like, in the middle of the pandemic, where we've pushed millions of women out of the workforce and you have daycare centers are shut down and that we still can't pass Build Back Better, it's shameful.
Mm.
So much of our work at Marshall Plan for Moms is turning to the private sector. And so much of the book that I've written, Pay Up, is about a playbook for the private sector to do. I actually think, I mean, even if you think about healthcare, the private sector offered healthcare before the government did. The private sector started offering paid leave before the government
Perfect.
did. So I think
Mm.
the private sector can actually make movement on childcare before the government did, because part of it is having this cultural shift, right? That, caretaking is not your private problem. So, back in the day, it was like, your child is your business, right? Because motherhood's a choice. And so you parenthood's a choice. You figure it out. But now the reality is it's an economic problem. You and I can't go to work unless we have childcare. We'll never get
Mm.
full labor market participation. We'll never recovery. We'll never, all those job openings, they'll never get closed, right? Until you solve the childcare crisis. So I hope companies are looking at this saying, yep, this is our opportunity to lead in this moment. So I am actually very hopeful and excited. But I think the thing is that the opportunity is not just to make sure that these benefits are going to be given to the women who are working in the corner office, or the dads who are working in the corner office. It has to be for everybody. We have
Mm-hmm.
to have a value shift. You know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
healthcare, right? Where this is just something that everybody needs to participate in our economy. And if we care about greatness, if we care about innovation, if we care about diversity, we need full participation.
Yeah, fully agreed. Thank you so much for your answer. I think we have 3 more minutes. Let's go with another question that is also really important. So, how can we be more inclusive, of trans and non-binary people in STEM?
I mean, this for at Girls Who Code from the beginning, we had a progressive policy that if, you identify as a girl, you can come.
Yeah.
And, we've had so many powerful, our classrooms became opportunities for what the society should look like. And we at Girls Who Code, when President Trump had his position against bathrooms, we wrote an op-ed.
Mm.
And we stopped participating with companies who didn't have the same value system. At Girls Who Code, I fight for all our girls, our trans girls, our gay girls, our Black girls, our Latino girls, our Muslim girls. Like, we have a sisterhood, right? Where these girls are building a world where we love everybody. You know what I mean? We support and elevate everybody. And so I do think it is very important for organizations like Girls Who Code and Marshall Plan for Moms to be the ones that are leading the charge. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
taking us out of these divisive conversations. You know what I mean? That show again that we need to, that basically we need to fight for our values and what we believe. And I always say with girls, it's like they will lead us, they will save us, they will heal us, because they were the first out there talking about trans rights. You know what I mean? Our human
Yeah,
rights. And
for
we have to
sure.
follow
Okay.
their lead.
Awesome. I think we're getting at time here. Any final remark or anything you feel like you want to touch on
I want to
before?
answer this last conversation about
Yeah.
Michael. Look, I do think that government should ultimately be the one that is, providing opportunities, you know what I mean, for everybody. But in the absence of government leadership, we can't do nothing. And when I think about Girls Who Code, when I started Girls Who Code, less than 1 out of 10 high schools offered computer science, offered CS. I could not get a grant from the government or a foundation to save my life. But who was willing to fund me? Companies. And the reason why I've taught more girls than any public school district in the country. And so to me, but when Google or Uber and people do the wrong thing, we stand up. Nobody owns us. And so I think that there's an ability to hold the private sector as partners and accountable at the same time in the absence of leadership from the government. We don't have a choice.
Those are really good points. Thank you so much, Reshma.
Thank
As a reminder, we're going to have a working mom panel, I believe, in now an hour from now. please look into the agenda. Make sure to continue the conversation over there. Reshma, again, thank you so much. It was really a
Thank you for
pleasure having you.
doing.
Very insightful conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. So thank you. And
Here.
so, yeah, camera, and for everyone else here, we are going to now go into our breakout sessions. So please check the agenda to go into the sessions. Simply you see my video here right now. On top of me, you will see a little event with a drop down menu, and that's where you are going to find all the tracks. So thank you and have a great day, everyone. And we will see you back here for our next keynotes in the afternoon with Julia talking about some of her projects involving costumes she did for the Black Panther movie. So stay tuned and see you all soon.